welcome to another episode of Van Gogh Goes Digital, a modern take on Dutch masters' art. So, today we're going to be talking about a painting which is quite interesting and one of the very famous artworks, which is in the New York, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And as you can see, it's the Cypress. So, this painting was done in the year of 1889 by Van Gogh while he was living in a mental institution in Saint Remy in France. After suffering a mental breakdown, and it was during this time that he painted some of his most famous work and including Cypress. And this painting was inspired by the view from his window, which overlooked a grove of cypress trees, olives, and a lot of hills. So, unlike his fellow inmates, Van Gogh had not been committed to the asylum. He could leave the halls during the day and go out and work and then retire to his cell. So he was under a much supervision as it was thought it was necessary, and he also had much independence whatever he needed. For example, he was allowed to paint and go around to see, observe, and use paints, brushes, and so on and so forth. And Van Gogh believes that the therapy would really help him, even if it was described as ever winding circles around in those months. And this asylum was the center of his life, and he really needed subjects at that time. And as you know, how asylums or any mental health or rehab institution work, they have a boundary so that their patients cannot go out for their own benefit and the safety of people outside and inside as well. So he had a very limited scope vision for him to actually move around freely and paint, even though he had freedom to go out. But if there is walls, you obviously feel constructed and contained inside it. So he always looked down upon the cypress trees and the olive bushes because it was not fitted into the Japanese standard, which he was highly influenced at that time. But once he was in this vegetation, which was in the Mediterranean region, the cypress trees and the olive groves and the sparse vegetation became his fondness. And it was during his time in Provence, in the institution, where he created a series of Provence paintings. And as you can guess, or as if you know about Starry Night, one of his very famous Starry Nights, there is a beautiful, luscious cypress tree right on the left. And yes, it was again inspired by the vision and the view over here in Saint Remy Hospital. So, what attracted Van Gogh was a question everyone was looking for. So, what attracted Van Gogh was not the picturesque, geographical region, but he was fascinated by the grotesque shape of the vegetation and the rock, and rather than adapt them into a picturesque, impressionism, he took them as they were because they afforded a natural version of his own need for distorted and deformed. All he needed to do was look. The motifs already had the quality of bizarre originality, darkness, and of demonic, which he was increasingly sought in his art. As you know, Van Gogh was suffering from mental health, and he was somewhat a very realistic artist in nature. So in Van Gogh's immediate Mediterranean environment, though the tree tended rather to prompt, thoughts of death, as we all know, cypress is actually a symbol of death and were generally planted in the areas of cemeteries. And this traditional association of cypress with death was, of course, known to Van Gogh. I quote, "It is the black mark in sunlight landscape, but it is one of the most interesting shades of black, for I can think of none more difficult to paint," unquote. So this was a quote given by Van Gogh in one of his letters to his brother Theo, and this was in the letter 596. And the cypress, which is the symbolism of life and death, sunlit, sheer, and black gown, was obviously predestined for Van Gogh's pictorial universe. There are only few views for the tree alone, though the landscape is so strikingly tends to dominate, as you can see. But those few are compacted, rich, and the two trees that you see on the right, they are not two-dimensional feature in a picture, as reliefs modeled from countless streaks of green. The sky and the greenery in the painting are arrestingly luminous, yet they still somehow lack the most palpable physicality of the trees. it as if Van Gogh had needed to grasp his subject in a tactical way. It is by no means coincidental that he chose to return to his thick and streaky brush strokes that he had sometimes used in his earlier days. And he's so freely drawn this artwork, and you can see the sky as well, the swirls and everything. So it is very evident that it was the part of the series which even Starry Night was a part of. So I quote again, or from a letter that he wrote to Theo, the cypress occupy me continually. I should like to use them for something along the lines of sunflower pictures. Similarly, he said for the olive trees, I quote, the olive trees are highly characteristic. One day I make something wholly personal of them, as I did of sunflowers. Unquote. In the asylum at Saint Remy, he saw cypress and olive trees in the same way as a utopian enthusiast he had once been to see sunflowers in Arles, a symbol of himself and his art. But these motifs don't really, represent the artist himself. They indicate the immense deliberation that went into Van Gogh's Saint Remy work. And these are the defining characteristics of the landscape art that he created. Now, the region, which is in Arles, had still been a vehicle for his vision for the future. Finally, and unmistakably there. In the beginning, brought down to earth, Van Gogh had his eye open to the landscape. It was only now that he could actually write to his brother with an open heart, I quote again, little by little, I am coming to be aware of the whole of the landscape I'm living in. To convey some impression of Provence is the essential to paint a few more pictures of Cyprus and the mountains. I see a way of making my work rather more complete so that you will have a series of Provence studies that are really thoughtfully and thoroughly felt, unquote. So you see the thought and the process Van Gogh put into making his artworks and the message that he wanted to give out. It is so phenomenally done. The way he sought and thought about nature, the way he used colors, the way he analyzed everything that he was doing. It is just beautifully preserved and kept on going for such a long time. And Van Gogh's style had a significant impact on modern art, and it inspired a lot of artists such as Picasso and Matisse as well. If you have seen Matisse and Picasso's work, you will see the resemblance and inspiration of Van Gogh in their work also. So his use of colors and the bold brush strokes have influenced a lot of artists. In conclusion, Cypress Saint Remy, created in the month of June, year 1889, is one of Van Gogh's exceptional work, capturing the beauty of the cypresses and the olive bushes and the power of human spirit through his use of colors, composition, and symbolism. Van Gogh has created masterpieces during his time in Saint Remy. He had a profound respect for the nature beyond the standards of beauty that he upheld in his eye. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and do let me know your thoughts about Van Gogh and his artwork, The Cypress. I look forward to speaking to you guys very soon. Bye. Take care.